So let's get started here and just briefly go over the application. Now, is there anyone here who has not completed a re-grant application from us? So you're new and you're new. Okay, great. So we've kind of made it as simple as possible. So everything we ask for is critical at this point. On the front page, there are a couple of things to be aware of. So number one, the deadline, which is October 14th. That's a very important date. While we do have a little tiny bit of discretion to give a couple extra days extension, generally, we really need the applications in by the 14th. So if you're 2 weeks out, if you're in the middle, if you're in early October, you hit October 1st, and you're in the weeds with the application, call Amari, and we can get you back in line and finish things up so that you can have an application in by the 14th. All right? We really want you to have an application come in. We really want the applications. The 14th is not meant to be a deterrent for applications. However, we then, after the 14th, have a really tight deadline as far as getting it to the grants review panel, then getting it to the C&H Commission at one of their regular meetings, and then getting it to the commissioners for their voting on the allocation of funds so that we can get award letters out in January. That timeline we can't deviate from, so that's why the 14th is crucial. Bilingual is available if you need it. We have a board member, a C&H commission member who is bilingual and can walk you through the application and assist in any way you need if Spanish is your primary language. We only need one copy of the application and all of the attachments. In the past, I know if you've done this for years, we used to have to get like 8 copies of everything. We do not need that, just one. Just one. And so who can apply? Nonprofits and government agencies. So 501c3s or affiliated agencies of government. Is there anyone here who is not a 501c3 or government entity? All right, good, we're all good. So we're all eligible, right? All right, what can be funded? Any publicly accessible arts or history event, program, or activity occurring in Cumberland County, that should be 2023. So next year in 2023, it has to be in Cumberland County, even if your organization is not primarily headquartered in Cumberland County. If you're doing programming in Cumberland County, you can apply for funding. And it needs to be publicly accessible. So, not in this county, I'm not going to say, but I was on a grants review panel in another county, and it was a private school. And they wanted funding for a art show that was only open to the students and their families. That is not publicly accessible. So you need to be able to, anyone from the public should be able to participate in your programming to make it publicly accessible. That doesn't mean you can't charge a fee or there can't be a door fee entrance or something like that, as long as it's reasonable. But it can't be exclusive in any way. And then operating expenses for nonprofits whose primary mission is arts or history and you're located in Cumberland County. You're headquartered in Cumberland County. So if your organization is a dance troupe, your primary mission is arts, you can apply for operating. Now operating has some additional, that's right, has some additional requirements, but you also have a lot of opportunity in operating to apply for a lot of eligible expenses. What cannot be funded? So capital expenses, so if you're going to make improvements, you're doing an expansion onto your gallery, that's not eligible. Equipment with a 3-year shelf life or longer for arts. If you're history, it's a little different. So history, if it's for, let's say, photography archiving and you need acid-free paper or acid-free boxes that are going to have a long lifespan, that's certainly an eligible expense. Deficit reduction, no. Scholarships, no. Food and alcohol, no. So those can all be expenses that you can show on your match side, but you can't use grant funds for it. Everything else, practically, that you can think of is an eligible expense. Match requirements, this year there are 0 match requirements again. So we had that last year and we're going to have it again this year. All right, so if both arts and history. So if you want to try to fund 100% of a program, you can submit it. It doesn't mean that we will necessarily fund it, but you can submit it. Acknowledgements, I always say this every year, it's very important when you're doing your programming that you acknowledge our funders and the county Board of County Commissioners, because that funding is crucial for this programming, and we want to see that everyone that's working to make that funding happen is acknowledged. A lot of our commissioners come out to your events, so they want to see. If they don't see it, then they're like, didn't we fund this? And we're like, yeah, why? Well, we didn't have, the county seal wasn't on there, or the Cultural and Heritage Commission seal wasn't on there. So in your grant agreement, when you get your award, there's specific funding language for art and specific funding language for history, and then we can get you any logos that you may need. So include that in your program book, in your marketing, if you're doing a radio ad, if you're doing social media, put that funding acknowledgement in there, that's crucial. It helps us and helps you. All right, so at the first page of the submission for your application is going to be this checklist. And this checklist has been whittled down to crucially what we need in order to make accurate assessments of your application. All right, so this will be your first page. You're going to, one recommendation is don't check it until it's in your packet. Because if you think, oh yeah, activity star, I'm going to do that tomorrow, and you check it, and then you submit it, and you're like, I'm all done, and then we get the activity star, and there's nothing in it. So make sure you take that little step. Don't check it until it's 100% complete. And everything that's on the checklist goes towards the criteria for evaluation that our grants review panel uses to create a score for your application. This is a competitive program. Each application is scored numerically, and then we use a calculation to determine your level of support based on that score. And then the second page is going to be in your application is your signature page. So the contact information should be the contact information for the person completing the application. So if you're, let's say, not the executive director of your organization, don't put your executive director as your primary contact, because what this is primarily used for is if we get the application and there are any questions, we're going to say, who do we need to reach out to here? Okay, and we give that person a call or email. They need to know, like, we're missing the activities chart. And if it's your executive director and they didn't have a thing to do with the application, they're going to say, what are you talking about and what's an activities chart? So just make sure it's you, and so that we can contact you if we need to. Then your program summary is your elevator pitch. 2 or 3 sentences max on what you plan to do with money. All right? And then what you're going to do is put your requested amount in one of these 3 columns. It's either going to be a special request, a general program support request, or a general operating support request. There should only be one line with a number on it. I don't know if we've gotten any, but I know other counties have, where it's like, yeah, I'll do 6,000 in special project and 8,000 in general programming. And,
Yes,
right,
we have.
right, okay, so just one amount, you can apply for one of the 3. Any questions on the signature page or the checklist?
Can I just give one
Yep.
quick question? One thing that came up last year that I think is important is that if there's programming for you to do a general program support, and you have artistic programming and historical programming, you can put in two separate applications. So
Right.
even though you don't want to put operating and programming, you can do a separate arts and a separate history if you have two separate programs, if you're doing programming support.
Right.
That was something that came up last year that I just thought might be helpful.
But if you're doing an arts application and a history application, they do need to be separate.
Separate applications.
Right. All right, any other questions on that topic? All right, so one of the items that we asked for on the checklist is the ADA plan. 1 to 3 pages, just talking about how accessibility is handled in your organization. So we hope that you have discussed accessibility at your board level, and that there's a board policy in place that simply states it's our policy that our programming be as accessible to all members of the public as possible. These are our mantras and conditions that we set for reaching that goal. And then we want some type of grievance procedure policy. So what happens if you have an event and someone in a wheelchair comes to your event and they can't access the programming? And they throw a fit. They are upset. How is your organization handling that complaint? So does the volunteer take a written statement at the event, and do they give it to your executive director? And does the executive director then present it to the board? And does the board then have, let's say, 30 days to respond to the complainant? What's the policy there? So we want to have something in writing so that we know that if you do have a incident, that you have a procedure to handle it. That's all the grievance procedure is. And then just generally talk about how your venues are accessible, how you're marketing to the disabled community, and generally how your programming responds to all members of the community. Okay? Are there any questions on the ADA plan? It does not have to be comprehensive. It does not have to be perfect. You can be certainly a work in progress. We all are. We're not fully 100% accessible no matter how hard we try. So it's really just thinking about it, putting it down in a short narrative and saying, yeah, you know, we use the Levoy Theater. We know that they're fully accessible, that they have ramps and handicapped accessible restrooms and large print programming and closed captioning, and you know, we know that these things exist and we're aware of them and we're trying to incorporate them into our program. Okay? And then in your grant agreement, you will receive an ADA compliance rider for any of your venues that you use. So we recognize that you may be renting space to conduct your programming, or let's say you're going to use Landis Park in Vineland for your programming. What we would ask is that if you're using a venue, you give the venue this compliance rider to complete, and then you keep a copy in your file and you give us a copy so that we know what venue you're using and what accessibility programs they have. All right, then there's no, if they don't have something, it doesn't mean you can't necessarily use it, but it's good to know, and it's good to have a record of what there is. And then the heart of the application is the narrative, and this is no more than 5 pages. So you're going to, you think, oh, 5 is plenty. You're going to start writing, and you're going to run out of space quick. So be as succinct and precise as possible in your narrative. This is your opportunity to relay what you're doing, when, where, why it's important to the community, and why it's important to your organization. That's what you're basically saying. And keep in mind that a lot of the members of the Grants Review Panel are outside of the county. They are not familiar with your organization. They are not familiar with your programming. And so you need to take that time in the narrative to give a brief description of why your organization exists, why you're doing this programming, why this funding is critical to you and your community. Which isn't that difficult. But if you're running into a mind block with it, give us a call and we'll walk you through it. Okay? Any questions on the narrative? All right. Publicity plan. So what we want to see with your publicity plan is that you're getting the word out for your programming. So a lot of times what we see is an organization has a core audience, which is great. You have a core audience, they know you exist, they love going to your programs, they come every time you have something. Awesome. But what are you doing to expand that audience? What are you doing to attract the community members that are not coming to your programming? Are you on social media? What do you know, a lot of our Grants Review panelists check. So if you say, you know, oh yeah, we're on Facebook and we're active, and we'll go to the Grants Review panel and there'll be a panelist say, well, I went on their Facebook page and their last post was 6 months ago, right? So it's important to keep an active social media, be innovative with it. So one of the things we've been doing is with Instagram, we kind of use Instagram as like the fun social. So we take wonky angled photos or different stuff, and we post that on Instagram. And Facebook is the more traditional, you know, face pic, you know, crowd smiling, that sort of thing. And then we're always looking at other venues and opportunities. We're always looking at updating our website. So your website should be consistently updated and up to date with information. And we want to make sure that you're using the proper acknowledgments. So if you have received funding in the past, make sure you attach some marketing from your past years that show the acknowledgement in your marketing so that we can see that. And then one of the things that's really important in Cumberland County is that you try to the greatest extent possible to include Spanish language in your marketing. So what we've seen a lot of organizations do is English on one side, Spanish on the other. And that, you know, we have a large Spanish-speaking population. And sometimes they're a little hesitant to come out to programming that they're not familiar with. And so Spanish language is a great way to make them feel welcome and to encourage them to participate. And then just give some thought on how you're outreaching to underserved communities. That's challenging, and underserved can be a lot of categories. So if you do programming that is at a theater and there are ticket sales, then you may not be attracting lower income folks because they feel they can't afford the ticket price given everything else. And so if there is some way to provide reduced ticket sales or reach out to a social services nonprofit that works in the community, collaborate with them on providing special ticket sales to some of their members. It's a great way to get the word out and to build the breadth of your audience. And then to some extent, in your final report, we asked you to identify demographic information related to your audience. That is very difficult to do, I know, but try to figure out a little bit if you're in a venue. There are different ways you can do zip code. Take the zip code of your audience members. take a photo of the audience and do an assessment later. You just want to try to figure out who you're reaching and who you're not reaching. And that's something we ask for in your final report, so we need some type of numbers, even if they're rough. It breaks it down, you know, over 65, disabled, some ethnicities, different categories that the state wants to see. So do the best you can with that. There's no easy answer. There's no obvious way to do it, but we do need some type of number there. And then Form A is your activities chart. This is real simple. The first one, you're going to say your projected year, what you're going to do, so that would be next year, 23, and then you're going to show what you've done this year. So, we get this question every year, and we're trying to simplify this as much as possible. So if you are applying for a specific project, let's say you're going to do an artisan's fair, all right? So you only have to put that project on your community chart. And for this year, if you did an artisan's fair or something similar, you would put that down for this year. You don't necessarily have to put every program you did in 2022 if it doesn't have any correlation to what you're applying for in 23. Right? If you're applying for operating, we want to see everything. Okay?
What if you're switching? Like, what if you did planning or programming before and you're switching to operation?
So for operating, you're going to want to put everything you did in 2022 and then everything you plan on doing in 2023.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it was related to the grant, like what the grant actually paid for last year, I can just put it
You
all?
just put everything. Yep. Yep. Any other questions on Form A? All right. Form B is in Excel on the website, and so you can download this in Excel and fill it in, or you can print it out and just write it in, whatever you want to do. The expenses chart talks about what the grant funding is going to go towards. So since there's no match requirement, you do not necessarily have to put any number in that matching column. You can if you want to, and you can if you do legitimately have matching expenses, it would be good to put it in there, because it'll show, you know, that you're contributing, but you don't have to. The grant request, you want to break out into these general categories, and we did not set these categories, the state did, so don't kill us, because they're a little confusing. Roughly speaking, A, personnel, are staff that work for your organization. B, are artists and historians and contractors that you contract with that are not part of your organization but you're using. And then C is capital expenses which are not eligible in any case, so you don't have to worry about that unless you're showing a match. And then D is other operating expenses, and then that's broken out pretty clearly on what that includes. So we'll do a little test here. So $200 in printing costs. Where would you put that? No,
Supplies and materials.
supplies and materials, right there. All right. Your administrator spends 48 hours of her time organizing your art event.
That's A.
That's A, right? So it would go under administrative. $100 for paint and paintbrushes. Supplies. Local theater is charging $1,200 for use of its stage.
Where's that?
Space rental.
That would be space rental. And a muralist is charging $800 for an installation on your building. B, correct. So that would be contractual services, artistic. All right, so that's not that difficult. If you run into an expense and you're not sure what category it goes in, call one of us, and we'll be able to walk you through it and tell you. All right, and then the same form for history. Sir Speedy Printing, Same category would be supplies. Again, your administrator is under administrative expenses. $100 for archiving software. That's a tough one. I would put that under technical production, non-personnel. But it could go under, I guess, supplies too. But it's always recommended that if there's a weird thing like that in your narrative, you just put a little budget. Let's just put budget narrative and say the $100 that is in supplies is actually for IT software services in case there's any question. $800 to remove an overhanging tree from your historic site. That would be contractual. Other. All right, so under history, you can do some yard maintenance, particularly if it's impacting a historic resource. You can't spend it on capital except in that one circumstance. All right. $3,000 for a consultant to complete a National Register nomination. That would be also contractual. Okay. And then we have the income side, and this again is broken out. A is generally income from your event or program. B is generally donations that you receive. C is contributed income from government sources other than this grant. So let's say you receive a grant from the Humanities Commission. That would go in there. And then other income, cash or loans, it's not critical or crucial. But then the amount you're requesting from the C&H Commission in 2023, you're going to put under Cumberland County C&H Awards. So that's your requested amount, is going to go right in there.
So on our form, it says requested in 2022, so it's not the
So
previous
that's a
year.
typo, it's 23.
Okay.
So I just got the TNC Arts Connect grant,
Yep,
so where would that go?
foundations. So there's a column under B for foundations. That's a perfect one. And here we go, $400 from Dodge Foundation. Foundation. $1,200 income from ad sales in a program book for your event.
Admissions?
That would go under merchandise, ad sales, concession ad sales. Local Ford dealer donates $400. That would be
Corporation
nice.
or business.
Corporation or business.
Yeah, RKKO wants to donate to me, but I don't count it until I have it,
Okay.
so I'm not sure.
So what we would want you to do here is project.
Okay.
So if you're expecting to make the request or you're expecting to receive something, put it in here. And then in the next form, I'll show you, because we want the foundations and corporations kind of spelled out a little more.
Okay.
$150 from a bake sale done a month prior to the event. That would actually go under individuals and other private sources because it was prior to your event. Earned income is during your event. B is prior to your event, donations. Again, if you're not sure, just reach out to us. And then Form D, we just want you to spell out under corporations and foundations who you're reaching out to. And if you've reached out and received 0, still put it in here. So if you asked Walmart for money and they said no, put Walmart 0, because that shows the grants review panel that you at least outreach to them. Okay? And then we have the community chart, Form E. We've tried to simplify this in the grant application. All we need to see are board and staff. All right, so in your application, you don't have to project what you're hoping to get in live audiences and all that. We just need to see how your board and staff fall in these categories. And the first column are the numbers for each category in Cumberland County. questions on any of these forms? That's it, that's the application. So attachments, you can put marketing materials, you can put photography that you've taken at previous programming, anything that you think would relay to the grants review panel the significance and importance of your event or program. Yes?
In the past, I've included a DVD
Mhm.
compilation,
Mhm.
but I've also now, in our electronic age, have it, like, for the panel, a YouTube link, so that they could then, because then now it doesn't work in somebody's machine, you have one DVD, you're submitting, not all the panel.
Mhm.
So would that be emailed to you guys, and then you would, do you know what I mean? I just thought that would be a way easier, quicker.
So you could put the YouTube link right into your application
Okay, with the support material,
with the support material.
okay.
All right, and that would give the grants review panel an opportunity to review it at their own
Right,
leisure.
right.
What we usually do if a flash drive is included in the application or a CD, then we'll play that during the grants review panel meeting so they can see it.
Okay,
But if it's on YouTube or something already,
right,
then it's great to include that link directly and then they can look at it whenever they want.
okay.
Yeah,
Would this be a good spot? I just had a couple of things about grants review panel.
sure.
Okay. So, when we get the grants review panel together, I've been lucky enough to do the last couple. A couple of things stood out from what Matt was going through with you. One was diversity has been a key thing. That was communicated to us through the state. It's been a big initiative with the state wanting to see diversity of audiences, diversity of boards. So you've probably gotten that back in your comments for those who have been constant applicants, that's something, because it's been such an area of focus. So just kind of keep that in mind, that you don't have to necessarily market to a certain segment, but just that you're trying to do things that will increase your different audiences. The places that you're putting it, your advertising, the, different places that it's going out to. Diversity is just a big thing. So the more that you see that, the better things will be for your application for the grants review panel. Also, the forms, like Matt was saying about looking at how much funding you get outside sources, that's been a big thing as well, because the grants review panel wants to make sure that we're investing in organizations that are strong financially. So the more sources you can show that it's not just all of your programming coming out of the Culture and Heritage Commission, but also that you do have other sources of funding, that's been really big. And then the other thing is just clarity of application. So sometimes the panel will come back and they say, I don't understand what this organization does. Last year we had 3 organizations that did that, and they scored really low. And it was a shame, because I was sitting there like sitting on my hands like, this is such a great organization, but they just, in their narrative, they didn't explain who they were, what the purpose of their programming was, where their money was going. So the panel only has to go on what you provide them.
Right.
So just make sure you're extremely clear about what you're doing and what your purpose is. Because when the panel gets it and they're sitting there talking and going, I don't know what this programming is, and it was a shame because a couple of those organizations, 2 or 3 of the panelists said, we just don't really get it.
Right.
Maybe it's good, and, we really can't have any input, it's just what's on paper, so those
And-
things are important.
And let me give you an example. So there's an organization that does a major event once a year, which is primarily what they ask for funding for. However, in their narrative, they talk about that event, plus they talk about a whole lot of programs that they do that are not eligible for arts funding. But and they just kind of mix it into the narrative. So then the grants review panel is like, well, they're asking for $20,000. Or do we know that money is going to go just for eligible expenses? Or are they going to split it between all of these events that they're listing in their narrative that are not eligible for funding? So that creates concern. So you can mention it, but just be very clear. We are requesting funding for this event. This is our primary event. This is where all the funding will go. We also, as part of our mission, do these events that impact the community. we're not seeking funding or would apply funding to these. We just want you to be aware of the breadth of our programming, that sort of thing. That would explain it right there. So, yeah.
I have a question, Amari. So, I was lucky enough this year to get your guys' grant, one from Ocean First Bank, one from PNC Arts Connect, and also a small one from Investors Bank. So that's, the Ocean First and, the Ocean First one was strictly for my summer camp, which isn't something that you guys funded, because you guys did my theater stuff.
Mhm.
So like, how do you write, like, where all of this funding is going? Because I know you're saying that you want us to show that others are supporting us, but
Mhm.
like, how do we explain that? Is that in the narrative, or is that?
That would be in the narrative. So you would say, you know, we were lucky enough to receive a PNC Arts Alive grant that supported our summer camp.
That's matching with this coming year, so that's Matilda, you guys are Matilda too. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
Yeah.
And then the Ocean First was summer camp, and Investors Bank was just a random $500.
Right.
Congrats on what you guys are doing, this is cool.
Right. Right.
I don't know.
So yeah, just try to explain as best you can in the narrative. You know, it doesn't have to be real detailed. Just that, you know, the amount that you received, the source that you received it from, and how you're utilizing that funding.
So I didn't know it's different between like what's already happened and what's coming.
Yeah, because that makes a good case for your organization. That shows us that, number one, you're outreaching and you're building diversity in your funding sources, which is great. And it's also showing that there are a lot of organizations that get what you're doing and support it strongly, which gives the Grants Review Panel incentive to continue to strongly
Take their
support
name
you as
on it,
well.
too.
Right.
Interesting.
All right. So, any questions related to the nuts and bolts of the application?
Yes, can you reread the last page for me again, the community chart?
Yes. So, what you're going to do is, so your board, let's say you have an 8-member board, governing board. So you're going to put 8 on total on that first column, and then you're going to identify how many of those 8 are African American, how many are Native American, Hispanic, white, how many are over the age of 65, how many are people with disabilities, right? So we can get a sense of diversity, equity on your governing board. And then if you have any paid staff, how that falls. We don't need to see volunteers, just paid staff. Okay?
Thank you.
All right, so the first thing you're going to do in strategic planning is you're going to figure out your core purpose. So you should have a statement that identifies what your mission is as an organization. Maybe it's just something generic like creating people in the arts. Maybe it's specific to your organization, present the preeminent Hispanic heritage celebration in South Jersey. Whatever it is, you want to identify what that core principle or purpose is. And then from that, you're going to identify your core values. And this can be I just gave some examples here, it can be a lot of different things. It could be integrity, leadership, innovation, education, whatever you're trying to do. Are you trying to educate the community on your particular art form, or cultural heritage, whatever it may be. And then from that, you're going to identify your strategies to accomplish your mission in your community, right? And there are different ways of doing that. All of these are eligible for funding. So, community engagement, you want to think about how to build community interest in your programming and organization. And I'm just going to show you an example. Let's see if it works. Okay, so this is in Little Tokyo and San Diego. Oh, no, wait, hold on, that did not show up. So that's 8.
It's just showing up on the screen, but not.
Yeah, it's showing up on my screen, but not
Well, now it's not. Now it is.
Is this it?
Oh,
That's it,
electrical
that's it.
department.
What do you do?
I went to, the duplicate, so it's showing what's on your screen.
Oh, okay, okay. So this is, this was a community organization in Little Tokyo, San Diego, that created a museum with nothing in it. And then they asked the community to submit articles and material that they felt represented the history of Little Tokyo. And then they created a blog that documents all of the submissions and goes into detail. They categorize them, and then you could go and they give a little history of that particular item, and then associated information, who submitted it. And what this did was it immediately connected the community to the organization, because the organization was promoting the pieces of history that the community felt were the most important. All right, now we go back to PowerPoint and go to here.
Hope you can go back up to your slides.
Does it go back to, where did it start?
Went all the way back to the beginning of
The beginning of, all right, hold on, I can jump through.
was the other one minimized?
I don't know.
Oh, that's a great meeting, going fast.
That's a fast meeting here, all right.
Almost
Here we
there.
go, almost there. All right. Programs and services. So these are just different ways of providing service to the community. So if you think about what could you do to make your community better, to make the lives of the people in your community better. This Muddy Meetup is a neat idea. This is a ceramic studio, and they created programming around motherhood. So they created free programming for mothers-to-be. They combined artists with perinatal health care and mental health care professionals, and they would all come together. The expectant mothers would de-stress by manipulating clay, which is very de-stressful. It's very effective. And they just talk. They talk, answer questions, or talk about challenges they may be having. Free programming that they established. Not only did it significantly help the community, but it attracted a whole new audience to the organization. And then the Fort Harrison Cultural Campus, so the community wanted to reinvigorate, redevelop, and so they worked with an arts organization to create a art installation in the park, and it was actually a swing set, and each swing, when you rode on it, made a different musical tone. And so, depending on who was swinging at the time, it made music. And what it did was it attracted the whole community together to collaborate. And you may not know the person on the swing next to you, but pretty soon you're like, all right, well, you swing this fast and I'll swing this fast, and we'll see what kind of rhythm we can create. Very effective in building community support, both to the organization and interaction with one another. And then community arts development. So arts and history can play a direct role in economic development within your community. Newark has created a mural program that connects the stories of the community through murals that also provide economic interest in the neighborhoods. So murals are very effective in creating buzz in your community. And what they've done is they've worked with local artists and local community community members, maybe working with an artist if they don't have artistic experience, to establish a mural program that's really been a bench setter, it's a really prime example of how to do a mural program. And one of the things to think about beyond your re-grant, we do have a mural arts program at the county. So we fund murals. Practically every mural you see in Cumberland County has been partially funded through the Cultural and Heritage Commission. If you've noticed the large Aztec-themed piece in Vineland that was recently completed by Alfonso Jimenez on Landis Avenue, that was funded through the commission. So if you have an interest in creating a mural and you're working with your community or your city and you have a location and you're just looking for funding, reach out to us, because I think this year we funded, each mural project received $10,000. So, and we're doing 3 this year, right? So we have 3 different projects going on. We're going to have several more next year. So if you want to do something like that, that's a separate pot of money. Organizational capacity. All of these categories here, except for fundraising, would be eligible for grant support. And if you're not doing operating, if it plays a component in your programming, then you can include it. So let's say your programming is going to be pretty volunteer intensive. You're going to be asking your volunteers to do a lot in your programming. And you need to do some volunteer management training. You want to bring somebody in to train your volunteers on public interaction and ethics and standards of practice, and that person you're going to bring in has a cost associated with them. They're a consultant. That would be an eligible expense, even in your programming. And you would just put in your narrative, we plan on relying heavily on our volunteers, and we need to build the professional capacity of our volunteer base. And so we're including $2,000 in our request for a volunteer management consultant to come in to help manage that process. Same with social media. If you don't have a lot of social media experience, you're kind of just barely online, and you want to bring in someone that's going to do a whole social media marketing campaign around your program, that's an eligible expense under your programming application. All right, so kind of think outside the box, and we're going to have a lot of money available next year, particularly on the art side. So if you have ideas and you think that they are an eligible expense, put it in. The worst we can say is, no, we disagree and we're not going to fund that part. All right, but we could say, hey, we love the idea, we think your strategic planning is excellent, we're funding the whole thing. And then your financial sustainability. So we've talked about this a little bit, where we want to see diversity in your funding sources, or at least an attempt to diversify. So the way you want to think about this is, where does your organization have impact? How do you use that community to provide financial sustainability, whether that is through program support, whether that is through donation outreach, whether that is through collaboration with other organizations in the community. And then how is that effort that you're making different than any other organization in your community? So, let's say we have a gallery like this in a community. How is this gallery making a unique impact on the community it's serving? And I think Diane could make a really good case that it's having a significant impact on the community it's serving. And then just talk about a little bit how you are considering how you're planning out this financial sustainability over the next several years. We get worried, and the Grants of You panel gets worried, if, you know, we look at your budget, because you have to submit your 990 or your basic organizational budget of some kind, and we see that we're funding, our award is 50% of your total budget. The Grants of You panel will say, that's worrisome, you know, that we need to see that you're building that sustainability, because we don't know. Next year, the state could say, we've changed our priorities and we're zeroing you out, or we're cutting your programming in half, your award in half. It fluctuates every year, and we never know what we're going to get. So we don't want you to be completely reliant on our grant award.
What percentage would you suggest?
It depends. As a starting organization, it can be a higher percentage. If you're a well-established 15-year organization, it should not be, you know, above 30% at least, probably lower than that. But if you're a starting organization, we recognize that you're building, so it's a little bit different. All right, and then if you do not follow us, the county, on social media, please do. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and we've been posting a lot. I know Wanda every Friday does a weekend roundup and shows all the things happening that weekend in the county with the brochure marketing and pictures and details. So if you have guests coming over, or you're not sure what to do this weekend, you know, you can look on our Facebook or Instagram, and you're going to see everything that's happening this weekend. All right, and then we also post interesting little informational tidbits. If we go out to an event, we were at the Marquise Bell Parade in Bridgeton this weekend, and Unity Day. Amari took some awesome photos of that event, and we posted them on. There was a great picture of me with Marquise Bell. So if he becomes super famous, you know, really like the best football player ever, then I can say, yeah, I know Marquise. Yeah, here's that picture. Yeah, follow us, and then, you know, we'll follow you and share your material as well.
And with that, as your organizations have stuff coming up, please send it specifically to Wanda, because she'll make sure it gets on our calendar and on our social media. We want to promote you guys as much as we can. So please, and as soon as you have flyers and stuff, get it to us, because we want to get it up on the social media.
All right, with that, is there any question about anything that the Cultural and Heritage Commission or the county does that